Coming. I'm glad the rain has stopped, and I'm pleased that you were able to join us today. About 6 weeks ago, Cbre did a talk, a breakfast workshop on digital marketing and where we thought the market may be heading and how marketing for real estate projects would change. I was hoping, like all things that Cbre does, that would be self-serving, and that the market would be strong enough and would have picked up enough that I wouldn't need to do any more workshops or presentations about marketing and that, but I was wrong. It would appear that the euphoria that we had at the beginning of the year, the expectation that prices, volumes, particularly volumes, would increase, that we wouldn't need to be doing marketing, not 101 but 102 for the residential sector in the middle of the year. Things have changed, and very pleased today that we're working with Red and particularly with Chris to do this workshop with you today. We are going to do 4 sessions of this today, here, and next week regarding the office and the retail market, and then we'll repeat the process in Hanoi in a couple of weeks' time. So if you have colleagues in the Hanoi market that may enjoy this, then please drop us a note and we'll make sure we give you the dates for Hanoi. The market, certainly Cbre spends a great deal of time looking at stats, looking at numbers and trying to interpret them and to work out what is relevant to us and what is relevant to our investors, developers, funding groups that we work with. And we forget, I think, very often that we're selling a home. Many of you are residential developers, and I think all of us need to take a good look at what we're doing and try to remember who we're actually trying to sell it to. 2007 to 2008 were very, very unusual years in real estate in Vietnam. Unfortunately, some of us think that that was the norm, and we want to get back to 2007, when there were queues at the door and we were able to sell anything to anyone at any price. Now, 5, 6 years later, I think we've got to remind ourselves that that wasn't the norm, and maybe this is the norm. This is a usual year. 2014, stock market up, stock market down. China puts an oil rig in the East Sea. Vietnam sends a few, not frigates or warships, but we send our trawlers. Okay? Russia takes a slice out of the Ukraine, and all sorts of other issues happen on the West Coast. Coca-Cola, this morning I had breakfast with Coca-Cola. They've just opened up a new huge plant. Samsung about to open another big plant in the south. So what is important? Is it the Ukraine? Is it the East Sea? Is it Coca-Cola? Or is it affordability of our buyers? Some of you this morning, as you passed the banks, saw outside the bank that the interest rate of the smaller banks is back up to 8.5. I saw a bank yesterday offering 8.75, which must mean that its mortgages are back over 10 again. So what's important? When you're building a home, are you looking at the mortgage rate? Are you looking at the affordability and what people's salaries are that they have to buy one of your products? Or are you just trying to maximize the profit? And I think, unfortunately, many of us have forgotten why we're building homes. We're building homes to generate good affordable housing, good middle-income housing, good luxury housing. Cbre banned the word luxury for 5 years. 5 years, because I didn't think anybody was building luxury accommodation. Sorry. Don't mean to offend any of you, but we're now beginning to use the word luxury again. I'm glad to see that some of you in the audience are in the luxury section. So, was fear and greed the main driver? Fear of not missing out or missing out on a deal, and greed because I had to have that deal? Or buying residential accommodation to house their family, house their parents, and house their children. I think today, hopefully by the end of it, you'll have worked out what your business is doing, what your developer is doing, what your fund is doing, and maybe how to do it better. We also are very pleased to see a couple of office developers here today. I just had a cup of coffee with one of them, and I had to remind him that, you know, when you do a marketing plan or a strategy, it's often a marketing campaign. Well, I suggest that you rip your campaigns up and you start a marketing war. Because if you think you can sell your project in 90 days, or 6 months, or out by the end of the year, you're probably wrong. That you need to have a 1, 2, 3, or 4 year plan. Some of our developers here today haven't been so ambitious. They've got slightly smaller buildings where they're able to do very, very flexible deals in terms of size, space, cost, car parking, service charge. And in the Vietnamese economy and the Vietnamese mindset, that seems to work quite well. Everybody wants the personal touch. And as we become more corporate and more institutional, and certainly Cbre is one of those companies that's very compliance driven, very corporate, very institutional, the way that we look at our clients, that maybe we're missing out. So I hope today, when Chris talks about branding and personality and longevity, that you'll bear those things in mind. We've had some bad news recently. The World Cup starting tomorrow morning at 3 o'clock will wash some of this away and make us all feel a little bit better about life. But this isn't going to go away. And uncertainty in a market is very difficult to deal with. We can deal with interest rates at 20%. We can deal with inflation just about 22%. But this kills many, many companies, particularly if your finance director or managing director or CEO is sitting in Hong Kong or Singapore and is too frightened to travel to Vietnam at the moment. So that really upsets me, because we're all living our lives here, working hard, and the people that actually manage money globally are finding it a little bit tough to make a decision that helps Vietnam. So thank you, Samsung, and thank you, Japan. The numbers that we look at, and many of our bosses look at, are these. But do you think a buyer making a decision on buying an e-home or a home project or one of Gen Capital's villas really looks at these numbers? Or do they look at their bank account? Do they look at their long-term job prospects? So let's not get too worried about some of these numbers, how Vietnam is doing, where Vietnam sits in the food chain. I didn't realize until my colleague put this on my desk yesterday that Vietnam's economy is about the same size as the market cap of Berkshire Hathaway, or Apple, or Bangladesh. Is that really relevant to families that are buying a home, a residential home? Probably not. Is the currency? Probably not. Is the mortgage rate? Yes. Beginning to be for the first time. Relevant to some, and more relevant to the affordable housing sector. At the top end of the market, people about maybe $300,000 or $400,000 aren't looking to take a mortgage out. But people that are trying to buy a home at $40,000 to $80,000, the mortgage rate is very, very relevant to them, because they're the ones that are taking out a mortgage. When we did our talk a couple of weeks ago, the CEO of Nam Long told us that 58% of his buyers were taking a mortgage out. And 92% of his buyers, within 30 days of handing over the unit, were moving in. Some of you here today are luxury or very high-end developers, and some of you are managing very empty properties. Not to say that you got the marketing wrong, but certainly the buyers that bought those units got their perception of the use of that property very wrong indeed. Of course, that's expensive for you, because you still have to manage an empty property. And you have to work very, very hard to try and get the occupancy up, to try and get the damn thing to pay for itself. I'm not going to go on for too long, but again, the press is all about big projects. The Vietnamese press and media loves these huge projects that companies came and spent hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars on starting a new industrial project. The reality is it doesn't affect what we're doing on a day-to-day business, on a day-to-day basis. So yes, it is good news for the press, in the press, and luckily these bigger projects haven't been affected so much yet. But again, I don't really think that it affects the chemistry in a family that's buying a $50,000 to $80,000 unit, or indeed the middle income sector too. What does affect us is obviously the stock market, because the stock market reacts very, very quickly to good and bad news. Okay, so again, we've seen money flows went into the stock market at the end of last year, and really the whole of last year, and then flow out again very, very quickly. But it can be tweaked by foreigners coming in, even though obviously there are many of the stocks that we look at are at the foreign ownership cap already. But you can see just how quickly. And of course, this is what Reuters and Bloomberg writes about. Okay. And again, I've talked about this before, the 5 apps that many Vietnamese families run through their brain at any one time looking at opportunities. What we are seeing, and I'll finish on this note, Chris, is that many families at the middle income level are able to differentiate between their asset classes and look at the stock market of gold, which, as many of you know, at the start of the year about $1,200 an ounce, and is back up to $1,280. But again, when these other asset classes come into play, real estate suffers. But if we go back to basics and look at the housing as an accommodation option, as opposed to just an asset class, then again we'll come up with a different marketing plan and a different battle plan. So Chris, please tell us all you know in an hour and a half about marketing residential property, or as long as he was, and very pleased to have you here today. Thank you.
But I will try and talk slowly, so hopefully you can understand my Irish accent a little bit. And I don't know if I'll speak for an hour and a half, but I will speak hopefully maybe for 30 minutes. And then if you have any questions at the end, then please feel welcome to ask. Yeah, look, it's as Mark said, there's been obviously some improvements in the economy overall, but what we often find in real estate marketing in particular is that, if my little buzzer will work, which way am I going? Okay, good. Is that often branding is actually overlooked. When we actually create a brand, frequently we have clients coming to us and say, hey, I just spent millions and millions of dollars on my real estate development, and now I need to put it into the market in about 6 weeks. Can you help me create a logo? And it happens very frequently, and it actually really normally only happens in real estate, and I don't understand why. So if anything, what I want to share with you is some processes, some example of case studies of how we can actually create what we call a brand personality for you. It gives you an extra dimension to compete more strongly over the short and long term to make you stand out from the competition, and many other benefits. So very quickly, we are what we call a branding consultancy and marketing agency team. We've been in the market 10 years. Just to quickly introduce ourselves, we have offices here and in the region. Please feel welcome to look at our website, red.vn, to read all our team profiles. The same principles we use whether we work with Unilever, with Kimberly-Clark, with Budweiser, actually still underpin what we can learn and what we do in the real estate market. These are some of the clients we've worked with in real estate, and we've had the pleasure of working with Cbre on quite a number of brands in terms of what we create as well in Vietnam. So anyway, let's get started. As Mark said, it's time to maybe look at how we can evolve from picking up the pieces to making us helping us to adapt to the changing market situation. One of the most interesting things we've seen from market research, whether it's with Cbre or independent research, is that more and more people, whether they realize it consciously or subconsciously, actually only trust real estate developers with the strongest brands. Before they look at any project features, facilities, amenities, location, they actually really don't get beyond whether or not they trust the real estate developer, because as you all know, some developers ran out of money, and there's various reasons why a lot of properties weren't handed over on time or at all. So with this in mind, my thought would be we need to especially really focus on our own brand as a developer as well as the project brand, because if they don't trust the developer brand, it's very difficult to talk to them about any other way that your brand can actually benefit them. So just to summarize, we may have a plot of land, you may already have a brand, you may have a development project, you may have office block, you may have residential apartments, you may have a resort, but you all have a CEO who's probably very demanding. You probably all have a lot of competitors that have grown or are getting more aggressive. And of course, we're always going to have to compete. So we can compete in a number of different ways, but our competitors can copy what we do in terms of our products. They can imitate the sales promotions. They can cut prices, and they can cut the same. They can go for the same target audiences. But what I want to say to you is that we can compete more strategically by creating what we call brands with impact. Okay? And put very simply, what I mean by that is just the same way we relate to each other as human beings, we relate to brands in the same way. So it's all about the same way we relate to each other, creating a great first impression, actually having a discussion, a dialogue, engagement with our target customers, and then getting them to take action. And action, which is important in this market, is yes, getting them to buy your brand, but also getting them to recommend it to their family and friends. Excuse me. So, why would we want to create a brand with impact? Well, a lot of people see branding and marketing as a cost, and it is. But what I would say it gives you in return is actually a price premium on the product that you're ultimately going to sell, and it provides you with greater opportunities to sell, of course, but it actually provides you a brand asset. And frequently in Vietnam, you see people, I'll not name names, but they use their developer name plus 1, 2, 3, or a very non-emotive name for a project brand. And what that fails to do is create any real emotional connection with the audience, and no actual brand value asset that they can sell as part of selling that project to another developer. So it's the actual opportunity to create a brand asset in the project you create is a huge opportunity that we can look to create, and I'll share the process to do that today. Right, so again, sorry, I don't know all of you, I know some of you, but just to clarify, what is a brand? Well, a brand, put very simply, is the sum total of what your target audience experience and feel about your product and service. It's very, very emotions driven. A lot of times we think we shop with our head, but the reality is we shop with our heart, and then it's the heart that drives us, it's our emotions that drive us, and then we rationalize it to ourselves afterwards with our head. But if we don't trust, we don't have the right feeling about a developer, we don't go any further. So what I would say to you is, a brand is the perception people have of your reputation, and it's your ability, as Mark said, to really understand and satisfy the desires of the target audience, and to help them say something about themselves, about their personality whenever they transact and actually, decide to move into your branded home environment or your office. Huge amount of the brand choices we say, again, to re-emphasize it, is about saying something about ourselves, about the smart choices we make, and what it says about our character, our personality, what we think about ourselves, and how that makes us look in front of our family and friends. So, to summarize and reinforce this point, strong brand personalities are ones that form emotional connections and trust with an audience. And these are the ones that succeed. Because fundamentally, whether you're Unilever, Coca-Cola, or real estate developer in Binion, wherever it might be, you need to know clearly what your brand stands for before you do anything else, before you go to market. And the way we can do that is by being really clearly focused. And when we create the brand, then being clear and consistent in how we continue to actually communicate the brand. And again, often a lot of your competitors really get beyond a scrap of paper where the chairman says, I think this is what the brand's going to be all about. And no one ever actually writes down what the brand is going to stand for. And 6 people, more often than not, will walk out of a room with a vision from a chairman or a chairlady, and will have 6 different ways of thinking what the chairman has actually said the vision for that brand is going to be. And what happens is then it's already confused, because the 6 people perhaps in the room that are responsible for creating the brand aren't aligned and don't have a consistent view or voice in sharing it with your customers. So of course then, how can we expect our customers to understand if the key stakeholders in the brand don't even know themselves properly, they're not clearly aligned. So if anything, we need to think, how, if we all were in an elevator, how in about one line could we actually say what our real estate brand stands for that's going to make it connect with your target audience, and it be distinctive as much as possible from the competition. So that's what we call the elevator pitch. How can we all make sure we say the same things when someone says this, what's your brand all about? Yeah? So this is the process I'll take you through. It is what we call the brand building with impact process. I really could talk about it all day, but I'll try and keep it short and sweet. It consists of about 3 key steps. One is contact, the next is react, and the third is attract. So contact, react, attract. I find it hard to remember more than 3 things at once, so that's why we kept it to 3 things. But the first step is what we call contact. And step 1 is essentially recognizing that you do exist in the marketplace, and that you can't sell a secret. If you don't really understand your target audience and what they're looking for, and if they don't know what you're standing for, they'll not consider it. The other big issue in Vietnam as part of this step is often when you look at your competition, when you begin to analyze where you're going to fit in, everyone pretty much says the same thing. Everyone seems to love putting pictures of buildings on their advertising with no people and no recognition of the fact that somebody might actually live in it, or play in it, or travel to it, or shop next to it, or enjoy the swimming pool there, ... So, if anything, you're starting in a good place, because there's actually most of the advertising in real estate in Vietnam is not very well thought through, or very disruptive, or very engaging, or appealing. So when we think about how we look at our branding, we need to make sure we do something different. It's fairly obvious, but it's more often than not, your chairman or your chairlady love their building so much, they want to see it on the advertising, and your customers, it's just one part of why they'll choose. So as Mark says, we're not trying to talk to everyone. we're trying to talk for any project to a very targeted, very segmented, very specific set of people. So we need to look at who they are, the demographics, where they are specifically. Are they really going to buy and invest related to where they live? The psychographics of how they feel. What is it they're looking to feel from their time living in your apartment, for example? What life stage are they at? What kind of behaviour do they want to do when they live there? And are they an end user, of course, or an investor? So these are all the kind of questions we can ask ourselves to really make sure when we agree internally and discuss amongst our teams, we're asking all these different ways of looking at our target audience so that we really are clear who it is we actually want to talk to, so that when we come to communicating with them, we really understand what they want. So we call this sort of a target audience segmentation or mapping. I'm really putting together mood boards, styles to really illustrate and visualize who the target customer are. So I encourage you to really make sure when you work together, you really visualize exactly who this person may be, and of course, who's the decision maker. Is it going to be the mum or is it going to be the dad? Because all of this influences then, of course, how you speak to them. Some research from FTA that we thought was particularly interesting, again, just to re-emphasize, was, again, picture all the different things, the lifestyle that your target audience can have when they're going to be living your residence. So it doesn't really harm sometimes to do a day in the life of what the target audience will experience. So this is just basically saying what, in this order, what this research agency found was most important. Yes, people think of capital gains, but again, re-emphasizing that point, the first thing they look at is the prestigious investor brand. Then they may look at the quality, the services, amenities, the kind of community environment they'll be living in. Is it saying the right thing about my personality? Will my family and friends approve? And the last thing they look at is reasonable price. And often when we look at our communications, the key thing we often highlight so much is the price when you do advertising. But the reality is, people are looking at that last. They may speak to you and say about the price as salespeople, but that's actually the last part of their consideration before they've even brought that up with you. So how do our communications and branding consider that and prioritize actually really what's important? Yes, as we said, how do we stand out from the competition? What we normally do at RED is part of this contact step is, again, I would encourage you to involve all the key stakeholders at the beginning of your brand creation process where you make contact with the marketplace, again, to help align. Sounds obvious, but frequently other people will be... I'll just show it a bit louder. Okay, back again. So frequently what we find is we've already come up perhaps with a brand name, brand strategy, brand name, brand logo, identity guidelines, and it's the first time the chairman's ever seen it. And then the chairman or the chairlady go, oh, this is completely wrong. What are you guys doing? Why are you showing me this? I have a completely different idea in my head. So these simple steps are very important to actually involve all your key stakeholders, wherever they may be. And once you actually collate all this information together and write it down, we move on then to step 2. And this is the same process, the same steps that Unilever used to create Omo, Budweiser used to align their brand, ... And at the heart of any good brand is what we call the written foundation, the brand for personality framework. And it's deceptively simple, and it's a key step most people don't do. But it's a document. It lists 9 key questions. And if you ask them together with your team, It helps ensure you're aligned together and asks all the right questions so that when you come to name your brand or do anything, communicate your brand, again, you're aligned. Sorry that it's a little bit small on the slide, but okay, it's big up there. We look at the competitive environment as we've discussed, those target audience segments, but number 3 is really important. It's what we call the target audience insights, and we normally focus in on about 2 to 3 maximum reasons what it is that is really driving the decision process of our target audience with regards to your brand, your real estate project. And from that, we can then say, okay, to satisfy what those customers are looking for, we move on to the core benefits, the functional and the emotional. So on the functional, yes, we know the price, the facilities. On the emotional side, is it going to be a place I'm going to love going home to at the end of the day? Are my children going to be safe? Is it green? Is it spacious? Has it got water facilities? All these things which make us feel in harmony, in balance, and enjoy and thrive in life. So we need to list again what those core benefits are in priority to our customers. We need to look at number 5, what are the core values that our brand, possibly the developer brand, are really looking for. What's really important to you? Because people resonate with people and brands based on what they think is important. So the quality, the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, the caring, the list goes on. So it's really more probably looking at your developer brand in this case, and how do you bring those values that you hold dear as developers that are important, that are relevant to your customers, and again, list those down. You know, it's very important because again, people connect with people based on what they value. The next is the brand personality characteristics. So again, people relate to people like them, that they like based on their personality characteristics. So we may want to look at describing the personality of our brand, you know, so again, harmonious, friendly, or is it sophisticated, uber modern, is it traditional, is it friendly and approachable, or are we trying to create a more premium, sophisticated experience? These words are very, very contradictory to each other, and again, if we write them down at the beginning, they affect the whole way that the brand will be expressed. Uber sophisticated, traditional, and warm and friendly. Very, very different. But again, if we write them down now, it helps us be clear how we communicate later. There's number 7 here is what we call the core reasons to believe. So again, putting ourselves in the shoes of the target audience, all these things that we say in terms of how we're going to benefit our customers, we say, well, why should anyone actually really believe what we say? Sounds pretty obvious, but again, you know, those are the kind of questions that your target audience will ask. Why should I trust you? Why should I believe what you say? So again, make sure we write them down. More often than not in real estate, it's your track record, it's your success in terms of all the other projects you may have succeeded with before. Often in Vietnam, of course, people have pretty good trust towards certain brands that have a strong track record from overseas. So local developers have to work, I think, even harder to show their track record of success, and probably can dial up the local understanding that we really understand you here in Vietnam and what's special to you. So those things are very important to clarify. And ultimately, it's a process. All of this information you gather is a process of focus and elimination. So again, you'll start off with lots and lots of information, but then how do you really boil it down to be what's relevant to the target audience and compelling? So this document is not pages and pages and pages of information that's going to make you fall asleep. It's actually bullet points, very short, concise amounts of information that are really compelling and really strong and relevant and different as much as possible from your competition. And you really should be able to write this document on one piece of paper, and that's the challenge. It's making sure that you're so focused on what your customer wants. Everything that's important about your brand will be written on one piece of paper. And it's not easy, but with a bit of focus and determination it can be done. So again, to recap, step 1, we've looked at the marketplace. Step 2, we've documented exactly what we feel is relevant to the target audience and compelling. And step 3 is more the fun part, which is the attract part. So this is actually where we start as a brand. We know what we stand for. Now we actually focus on how we express ourselves. So this is the 2 key things. What we stand for first, before we focus on how we express ourselves. And I'll just show you a couple of examples. But again, our project doesn't exist in a vacuum. The first questions we need to ask ourselves when we create our development brand is how it fits in relation to who's investing in this, what is our developer brand? Do we have any problems with our developer brand, or are there strengths we can highlight? Do we have many projects that we want to communicate? Do we need an umbrella brand to be able to support multiple project brands, etc.? So we want to try and map out at the start all these elements and how they relate to one another, your brands relate to one another and reinforce and strengthen each other. This goes back to the brand framework in terms of what we mapped out in terms of the reasons to believe in what we do. So all these interconnecting brands, like Unilever is behind Sunsilk, or P&G is behind Colgate. All these things flash up on TV, and whether we realize it or not, it gives us reasons to trust Sunsilk apparently just that little bit more. This is the same thing in real estate. We have our project brands, but people know that behind this is a strong investor, and they're going to get their project, and it's going to be good quality, top. So we need to think about how we link those 2 together. So just an example we worked on with Vina Capital. Here we have, for example, Vina Capital is an investor. Vina Living was a lifestyle brand which focused in on the lifestyle that people would have from all the different Vina Living brands. In this case, the umbrella brand developed was what we call Da Nang Beach Resort. And within that, I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, we had different brands that we created that were targeting different target audiences, mainly on income level and interest and lifestyle. So it's the largest integrated resort in Vietnam, I believe. The beachfront, obviously, price premium. So we wanted to create a sub-brand that is at a higher price point, and we could communicate that as one brand with one set of benefits and reasons to believe. Norman Estates is our opportunity to bring in a brand ambassador, Greg Norman, with a focus of the villas all around the golfing lifestyle that he is involved in. The overall largest component, the ocean villas, named the ocean villas because they're right next to the ocean. The Da Nang Golf Club, designed by Greg Norman. The Dune residence is actually sitting in the dunes, in the golf course, and then a slightly lower price point, the Cham residences. So segmented all around a lifestyle, people wanting to escape, get out of the cities, in this case mainly Hanoi. I think 90% of the buyers were from Hanoi. And sophisticated, enjoyable, relaxing, harmony, and different price points to cater for what you can afford. So from this, again, we communicated the developer brand very extensively before we really got to any individual project branding communications. The Vina Living brand was created. There's various different ways it was marketed. And we looked, of course, at different names and for the actual umbrella brand, Da Nang Beach Resort, right down to the individual projects, even branding the individual restaurants and the different amenities and facilities, because frankly there is a concern that people had that when they lived here, it was a little bit in the middle of nowhere, what were they going to be able to do in terms of facilities and amenities? So we even looked at individually branding the rock salt as it became. I think I've just listed a few things to consider when we actually choose a name. Again, everything you do can relate back to the brand framework that you created at the beginning of the process. It can inspire the brand personality characteristics, it can inspire what your naming may be. But obvious things are that it's actually easy to pronounce and say in Vietnamese. More often than not, sometimes people get carried away with fancy names or complicated names to make it sound sophisticated, and no one can say it, and then it gets shortened into something that sounds quite ugly. So be careful for that. Of course, when we create names, make sure you can get the domain name. Being able to market it online clearly and intelligently is very important, as most people will, the first thing they do these days will be go to your website to find out more information. Talk about that more in a minute. What's very important is when we actually create the name and we look at the identity, the logo, and the likes, we actually have what we call a brand tagline. And the brand tagline, again, is inspired by your brand framework, links together, and it says clearly what your brand actually stands for and how it's going to create this emotional connection, this lifestyle, this lovely experience that your target audience is going to have when they live in your development. So it needs to be, as I say here, meaningful, distinctive, easy to pronounce, say, again, easy to say amongst your team, easy to share in a lift, and it's very straightforward. So these are just some examples that we created that I know some of them really upset some of their competitors because we did a little bit of comparison. So set your investment on the right course was comparing 2 golf courses in Da Nang. But anyway, but you know the key thing is it's not something that you change every month or two. You create this strategically so that over the long term your brand proposition reinforces what your brand is really going to offer, what it stands for. So it's different to your advertising campaigns, which may have different communications over time, but your brand tagline, like Coke, the real thing, stays as permanent as you think it's adding value. Again, when we come to visually expressing your brand, it's very, very important. We recognize how people actually understand and decode brands. And the way that people, the order in which, maybe I should add a slide here, that people decode brands is in the following order. Number 1 is actually color, then the shape, then the icon rather, the shape of the icon, the graphics that may support the shapes that they see, the imagery, and then last, it's what they actually read. A lot of people think they read stuff, but they don't. When you walk into a shop, you're driven by color, then the graphic shapes, then the image, and you read last, because we're not supposed to read. It's a long story, but essentially we're driven more by the other elements, by what we read. Reading is what we do last. So therefore what's important is every time you communicate with your audience, you don't use different colors, different typeface, different shapes, different imagery. It would be a little bit like the next time you see me dressing up in purples and pinks and having a completely different hairstyle and talking in a different accent. You think that's pretty weird. You think I'm nuts. So why would you do that with your brand? You know, and that's what a lot of people do. Every time they go out, they're inconsistent. They're confusing their target audience, and of course, confusion means they lose trust. So if we have clear brand, what we call brand identity guidelines, it helps ensure that the brand we create at the beginning is actually clear and consistent right the way through. And people learn how to understand it, and through learning to understand it, they admire it, they trust it. So quickly, a checklist of what should be in your brand identity guidelines after you name your brand, after you create probably the logo. We should look at things like making sure how your logo is used consistently. There's a document that can list that down. We call that the do's and the don'ts. We have these consistent colors, so you may have a primary color, a secondary color, You have clear and consistent use of typography. Typography is a huge part of branding. I won't bore you too much, but again, typography, the right typography can mean you look really weak and confused. The right typography can also mean you're very strong and bold and clear-minded. And that's what we take out of it, whether we realize it or not. And of course, brand imagery. It just cracks me up, as we say in Ireland, or it confuses me, that people will invest hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes in real estate projects and then spend about $2,000 on an image to sell it. Yeah, so I really recommend, if you do imagery, remember the lifestyle you're trying to communicate about your brand. Remember how people, again, wanted to express their personality and say something good about them. So if we're only going to focus on a bit of a 2D, boring graphic of a building, then we're missing a huge opportunity. So I would advise anyone, when you start, look back at your brand framework. What are the benefits? What are the personality characteristics? How can that inform a great photography brief for talented photographers? The cost of photography and rendering has come down dramatically in Vietnam over the last 5 years. But again, through photography, we can tell the whole story, inside, outside the residences. In this case, this was taken from a helicopter. These days, the beautiful thing is we now have drones. This is a drone. This is revolutionizing how we can begin to show our projects. So we can really give people a sense, perhaps, of the location that they will be living in, and seeing it from all different directions. And then, of course, sharing all these video clips, 3D fly-throughs, imagery, on YouTube. Sounds obvious, but most of the searches I would reckon that will come up now, if you put in real estate related searches, will show video clips on the first page. So there's a great opportunity with video for us to use YouTube and to get our project up higher in the search engines as well. So very, very valuable and great investment in our opinion. This is something else which is pretty interesting. This slide talks about all the different, what I call the communication touch points, all the different opportunities for our target audience to be connected with. Sadly, often people think they do a print advertising campaign and that's it. The interesting thing is, as I'll share with you later on, is that most paper-based media is all declining, and you can't share it very easily. When people look for real estate now, I think most of your target audiences, the first thing they'll do is Google. They'll ask their family and friends. Once the family and friends give them a recommendation, what will they do? They go to Google. They go and check it out. They go and find out what people are saying about the property on a blog. They go and find out what you say about yourselves through the quality of your website. And they'll look at the imagery, the messaging, and all the branding to make up, consciously or subconsciously, whether or not they will then pick up the phone to Cbre. So, what am I saying here really? The digital and the web is the most important channel now in Vietnam. We see this a lot across all categories, not just real estate. So, going back to the point of building a brand with a personality, if they get the wrong first impression of your brand on your website, then you have either lost the opportunity or you're going to have to work a lot harder in other ways to regain the trust. So digital and your website first impression is critical. But of course now we can see the media landscape, I think, in a different way. It's not just print advertising, outdoor advertising, or hoarding around our site. I think we need to look at it in what we call owned, earned, and paid for media. What I mean by that is what we own is the brand assets that I've just outlined, the content that we create and publish on our blogs, on our website, the core brand image. But of course now more and more people will help us share our brand. You know, huge amounts of people are very, very sociable and love sharing what they do. So if we can encourage people to not only tell their friends and family about a great investment opportunity, a lovely place to live, but we can facilitate that through the likes of LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, other blogs. We obviously then can earn a lot of free media by their word of mouth online. And I'll talk about that in a little bit of time. Okay, so this is just a few examples of Da Nang Beach Resort, what we did in terms of branding and marketing consistently for these guys, setting the scene for the overall development with Greg Norman as a brand ambassador endorsement. Again, yes, we showed the building, but not only the building. And we also showed how it fitted in together consistently with all the other brands that were part of the lifestyle experience at the Da Nang Beach Resort. We also were some of the first to use the QR code. Some people know about it, some don't, but essentially it's a code that you can scan. It doesn't have to go through. This provides a link to the internet. It doesn't have to just go through to your website key address. It can go through to a video on YouTube or a more richer experience to create a great first impression for your brand as well. So QR codes are getting cleverer now that you can actually change where the link goes over time. So throughout the life cycle of your project, you can be linking them through to more interesting, richer, engaging, emotional pieces of communications, not just the homepage of your website. Again, the branding when people come on site is all clear and consistent throughout. The web experience is very consistent. Again, wherever we put the branding, we put the tagline. Don't forget your tagline after you maybe created it. Be consistent in using it. Norman Estates. Norman Estates was a particular brand which we really love to work on. Again, we created branding, but we also created the tagline again. And this was all about this golf. Greg Norman loved, inspired lifestyle. We then developed everything I just said to you in terms of the branding, clear use of colouring, imagery, tagline, communications. This then rolled through consistently into everything that we then created, right through to the hoarding when people turn up, drive past, the web experience, content sharing again in terms of YouTube. People, it sounds obvious, but people love to see video clips and live webcams of the actual development being built. I think you'll see a lot more live webcams, again, as a reason for people to believe that you really are not just playing with dirt, but you are actually building something there, and you're keeping your promises and when you're supposed to be delivering the project. Email marketing is very important as part of this, again, consistency in how we do email marketing. Not just putting it in any old template, but actually remembering that your audience is weighing up from the brand image also. Even from the email communications, they'll again want to see it consistently. I'll talk more about digital in a minute, but of course there's opportunities now on social media sites to extend your whole brand experience. So if people want to share it, you're facilitating them sharing it as well. This was, again, in this case, leveraging the shark, the white shark as he's called, Greg Norman, for the Da Nang Beach Resort because of his huge social media presence as well. So we leverage that. Yes, of course, different events, activities, as Cbre will tell you, inviting people on site is critical. Whether the buyer may be in Hanoi, getting them down to Da Nang or wherever your real estate project may be, give them reasons to actually turn up and find out more information. We've done all kinds of branding for these different events and gifts. And really it's, again, about trying to get that whole brand experience through, even into the event. The same consistency comes through. Again, brand ambassadors you may wish to consider. Not to go into too much detail, because I'm sure I'm talking too much, but again, you don't have to say everything at once about your brand. There's no harm with doing building excitement, anticipation. So in this case, building a sort of teaser campaign before we explained who was actually behind the brand, what the full lifestyle would be, and then ultimately what it had to offer, more on moving from a more emotional aspect to a more functional aspect of what the development would offer. So this obviously, as Mark has already said, isn't over a few months. We have our guidelines, we have our tagline, we have our assets that allow us to keep communicating consistently. Just other examples, just to re-illustrate the point. This is a small township project down, with being a capital down in, where is it? Pham, I think. Nha Trang. So what the whole concept was here again was we were building apartments and residences which were quite premium, but a little bit more upper mainstream. And we wanted to create a place where a lot of people in the local area would actually aspire to live, or people from around here would like to move or go to for a family home. So the great thing about that location was it was actually between the city, the mountains, the river and the sea. So research said that the feng shui played quite a large influence on the decision-making process. So in this case, we leveraged on that and we created this brand, which is all about this great, beautiful home between the mountains, the rivers, and the sea, very feng shui friendly. So we created this lovely, rich, earthy brown colours because it was all about natural harmony. And then we created this sort of feng shui, more traditional, authentic kind of style, graphic shape to illustrate, again, the mountains, the river, the sea, and a little taste of what the project quality would be like. We then carried that along into different communications, actually showing the anticipated lifestyle that people would have there, in this case around tech. We carried that same style, colour, graphic shape into brochures, the web, and of course the branded experience, the event as well, and different communications, the hoarding and the likes. So, just to recap, I'm almost finished. Again, just to emphasize, the shift in digital media is dramatic compared to 2007 and 8, when a lot of us were very active. Now it's all increasingly moving over to digital, so you can see the rise in the amount of time people spend online has dramatically increased. These are just a few slides that show it's not just people who are up to 25. I often used to get that comment that, oh, it's just young people that use social media or the internet, and that's clearly not the case. This is what they're doing at home, at work, looking up brands. That's the time of day they're doing it at as well. So if you're looking to do email marketing or sharing content about your brand on social media, that's the time of day that you should actually be looking at it. Whoa, hello. This is again what 35 to 40-year-olds are doing. We can see that nearly 70% are on the internet regularly reading news, which of course can include news about what you're up to with your brand as well. This is just a snapshot of the most popular websites that the broader audience are actually on, Google being by far the most popular. And again, just recognizing that the big shift is, of course, people now are on the go with very cheap 3G internet connection, and they're using the mobile phone for everything, to collect their work emails, their personal emails, to share things with each other. So, it's very important that all of this branding and the consistency that you do actually works on a mobile phone, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Key thing, we could talk about this for an hour at least, is about search engine optimization. So when you're developing your website and your communications, we need to be thinking about the kind of keywords that people are typing into Google. So what phrases, words, Vietnamese or in English, or whatever the language may be, are people using to find your brand? And are you actually using those words on your website? Is your website what we call search engine optimized to be able to be easily found and come higher in Google, for example, versus your competition? We can talk about that maybe more another time. Search engine marketing, there's every day hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people type in Google AdWords words that you can do research on Google AdWords, for example, that shows how many people are looking for real estate related information every day. So we need to maybe consider buying those most popular keywords. I would think in Vietnam they're not that expensive because not many people are using search engine marketing aggressively compared to other markets. As I said, social media, how can we be part of that conversation? So the content that we share, construction updates, information about our next upcoming event, how can we share that it's going to be of interest and viral and get people to have more awareness about what we're doing. I think almost the last stage is again the brand image, the brand consistency that we've been talking about. There is this thing called what we call adaptive interface design, which means whether your target audience is looking at your brand on a mobile phone, the iPad, tablet, or desktop, that you create your branding, your image, creating that great first impression, so it looks brilliant right from the first time they may engage with your brand on digital. Okay, so in summary, that is the three-step process: contact, react, attract. It is again, putting it simply, being really clear and aligned internally from your heart what your brand is going to stand for, to emotionally connect with people's hearts before their heads. We can achieve that by being ruthless with ourselves and being really focused and clear-minded, ensuring that we're totally relevant to our target audience, so that over time, over the long term, we consistently say the same things and we reduce resistance to our brand and we build relevance and appeal. And of course now we can connect in many different ways, not just print advertising, and we can give people a real genuine experience of the brand that they're going to love and then recommend to their family and friends and help you guys sell. Thank you very much.